For many of us, one of the main objectives of a public school education was to learn to be good citizens. We were taught that the United States was the greatest nation on earth and that we were the luckiest kids alive because we were born here. Then things changed. We'll talk about civics education right now on the Law Works.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for the Law Works is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The Law Works is made possible by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and legal system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. By the generous support of Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, providing high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems. And by viewers like you.
How do we learn about our government, our nation, and our role? My guests are Gene Ambrose of the West Virginia Civics Literacy Council and West Virginia Deputy Attorney General for Civil Rights, Paul Sheridan. Gene, Paul, thank you for joining us. Civics education, well, what is civics?
Well, very simply, civics is the rules, the structures that we define about how we're going to work together in our communities, in our society. The civics of a monarchy are different than the civics of a democracy like we have. But it's very simply how we work together to improve our communities and our nations. And usually it also involves, as we typically understand it, our history, how we've gotten to the point where we are, and the lessons that we've learned from that history.
You use the word we a lot, the rules that we define and that sort of thing. Who is the we that decides what civics is and how it's going to be taught?
That's a really good question. We in the United States talk about we the people. The preamble of the Constitution starts with we the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union. And so we are the citizens of the United States who, particularly in a democracy, have a responsibility to teach the skills and the behaviors of a good citizen to each successive generation. So I would say that the we is this current generation of citizens thinking about what are the civic behaviors and the knowledge that we need to pass on to the next generation in order to keep our democracy healthy.
When I was thinking about this, and it's interesting that you bring up the introductory phrase of the Constitution, we the people, because that came to my mind too, and I found myself wondering, is it still, as the founders, the writers, the drafters of the Constitution wrote, we the people, or are we now more than just one people? Or is it we the peoples now, or is it still we the people? Or is America still the great melting pot?
I think it isn't much different now than it's ever been. This country was settled by people from fleeing persecution. It was settled by people who were looking for an opportunity to make a buck. It was settled by people who had some specific ideas about new ways to live together. And it has always been a conglomeration of characters and peoples from various places who our founding fathers melded together through the development of the Constitution into a people who subscribe to a set of principles. And unlike many countries in the world where you're a citizen solely because of birth, or a citizen because you share blood or a tribe, in the United States, while you certainly are a citizen if you're born here, if you subscribe to our principles and you've lived here for at least 5 years and it's your turn in the immigration quotas that come up, then you pass a test and you're a citizen. And that is, I think we don't appreciate how that's unusual in the world, and that it's something that has been in existence ever since the founding of our country, that it's a strength of our country to have this variety.
I don't appreciate it because I don't understand how immigration works in other countries. Is the United States really distinctly different from what happens in other places in the world?
In terms of the definition, the more open path to citizenship that we have in our country than you often find in other places, where it's very important for you to be either been born in a particular place, or that your family should have been there for a long time prior to your being there. In any number of countries, you may live in a country for generations and not be allowed to become a citizen. And that is not true in the United States. And I think it's one of our great strengths that we have that path to citizenship, even though often people need to wait in order to take that test.
We probably ought to take a step back. Jean, you're with the West Virginia Civics Literacy Council, and Paul, the Attorney General's office, I guess, is a member of the Literacy Council. Mm-hmm. What is the West Virginia Civics Literacy Council?
It is a coalition of agencies and organizations. It was created under the leadership of Priscilla Hayden, and with a resolution of the state legislature. And the organizations that are involved have a passion for and a commitment to the development of the next generation of citizens.
I want to mention just a few of the organizations because it's an impressive list. The League of Women Voters, the West Virginia Humanities Council, School Superintendents Association, both of the Teachers Union, the WVEA and the Federation of Teachers, Commission for National and Community Service, West Virginia Center for Civic Life, the West Virginia Bar Foundation, one of the underwriters of this program, mm-hmm. West Virginia Board of Education, Department of Education, Department of Arts and Education and the Arts, Secretary of State's Office, Supreme Court, Attorney General's Office. That's just some of the names on this. That's a pretty impressive group of people, which begs the question, why was it necessary for all of these entities to get together to be concerned about civics education?
I think we all have a stake. I mean, if going back to your original question of civics, and Jean was sort of talking, it's sort of about it's the how things work kind of in the common space, not just government, but the various places that we kind of come together as a community, either on the local level or even on the national level, and we all have a stake in that. And your question about are we more than one people? Well, we certainly have a diversity. There's a wide diversity of Americans. We come from different backgrounds and different experiences in different regions, but we share that common space of what it means to be an American. We share that part, and I think all of these organizations are organizations that recognize that we have a common stake in that. If we are not teaching our children how to be citizens in a democracy, if we're not teaching them the responsibilities that go with that, how to exercise those responsibilities, we can't really expect to see democracy
But in my day, and we're all more or less the same age here at this table, I think, at least within a decade of each other. We just went to school, we had a civics class, we learned how to be citizens, and we graduated from high school. Isn't that enough?
I think in our day, as you say, people learned civic behaviors from their families and their faith communities, and television was this little tiny screen.
Be careful, we're not that old, and you're not either.
I remember watching President Eisenhower's get elected, so I remember TV.
I remember those ads.
Back to the 50s, and we spent a lot of time outside in the neighborhood, and I actually grew up in New England and remember going to town meetings with my father. And learned about citizenship and what some of the roles and structures of a citizen, somewhat by osmosis. It feels to me as though those were simpler times, perhaps, but also we had state history and civics classes that a decade ago or so in many states and in some still just weren't being taught anymore because they'd been crowded out by a lot of the other subjects and concerns that schools have taken on over the years.
Crowded out of the public school curriculum.
Crowded completely out of the public school curriculum, yes.
I know a few years ago there was great consternation by several bar groups, bar as in lawyer groups, not as in have a beer here groups, that civics as a formal class was not being taught in West Virginia schools. Mm-hmm. And they sent letters and filed petitions and made appointments with various people to try to get it back into the curriculum. And as I understand it, it is now back in the curriculum, but to what extent?
Well, there are a couple of courses that are required in high school in order for people to graduate in terms of civics and American history. Most people believe, and certainly the Civics Literacy Council believes, that by the time people are in high school, their civic dispositions or their attitudes toward citizenship are starting to they've been set, basically, and that you really need to start much earlier in a student's education in order to model and talk about what it really means to be a good citizen.
What does it really mean to be a good citizen?
Well, part of what it means, I think, and Gene's talking about sort of, civics, the basics of civics is learning a little bit about how our system of government works and that sort of thing. But part of it, I think, there are many parts of it. One part is learning how to think, to be a critical observer of events and a critical consumer of information. I think that's a really important part of civics. You can't expect a democracy to work unless citizens are both inclined and able to see what's going on around them and process and analyze that in a way that makes their participation meaningful. So that's part of civics education, and it takes some accepting of responsibility of one's role as a citizen to sort of step up to that. That's a little bit of work. Again, it's not just a passive kind of thing. So part of my hopes for improved civics education is students who, practice being critical thinkers.
Can you teach that in public schools now? I remember as a high school student, I had some great social studies teachers. By and large, they were World War II veterans who had spent a lot of time thinking about what America was, thinking about what good was and what evil was, and I suppose we could debate that for a long time. And when they came into class, you didn't say anything that wasn't challenged. You didn't have an opinion that wasn't subject to debate, nor did they, and it was really an open give and take. But now, I kind of get the feeling that we don't want to challenge people's opinions, that we have this concept that you're entitled to your opinion, I'm entitled to my opinion, we'll just agree to disagree, but you're an idiot and I'm a hateful SOB or something like that. The things I see in the media during an election campaign, do decent people not run for political office anymore? Think about that for a second. We're talking about civics education. My guests are Jean Ambrose of the West Virginia Civics Literacy Council and West Virginia Deputy Attorney General for Civil Rights, Paul Sheridan. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. So it seems to be so much hate thrown around that you're just not a worthy person because I'm a better person, and I find it hard to believe that that's true. But where am I going to learn differently? A child sitting in front of a TV set now watching the ads in our governor's race here in West Virginia, the current election cycle. Neither of these people deserve to live. Well, and that's not true.
Adults have to model that, I think. And I think you're talking about another part of civics, which is a recognition of the legitimate rights of other members of our community to have views and to put their views out. You know, it's I think in a democracy, people should be able to disagree while at the same time recognizing the membership rights of the person they don't agree with, that right to have that different view. And I think we learn that by seeing that modeled, which doesn't happen as much as I would like.
Where did your civics education start, Jean?
Well, I mentioned going to a town meeting with my dad, and that was something that I had forgotten about. You know, the New England town meeting is kind of the paradigm of the way democracy works, where we all came together once a year, and I went with my dad, and we listened to them talk about the town budget and whether they were going to build a new school and where it was going to be. And I can remember being so surprised when my dad jumped up and spoke in a big room. You know, it seemed like a very brave thing for him to do, you know, to talk in front of all those folks. And but I can remember seeing him do that. But it wasn't really until I came to West Virginia that I think I really understood how it is that communities really require everybody in order to run. And maybe partly it's because West Virginia sometimes hasn't had all the resources that other places have had, but there's a strong community life in many of the places that I lived here, where if something's going to get done, everybody has to pitch in and do it. And I worked with an organization called Literacy Volunteers, and went around the state of West Virginia, and hundreds of volunteers helped me teach other adults who needed to learn how to read. And it was the first time that I really had been exposed to that kind of community service and volunteering on the part of folks. And it made me realize that when I was asked to be a volunteer, that I needed to step up and do my part too. And I think that sense, that understanding that we're all in this together, that no matter what I might think of you or what I think of Paul, we're living in the same space. We love our country, we love our communities, we love our family. We need to get along. And we need to learn those skills and in order for us to be able to solve problems together. That's one of the major parts of civic education.
How did you see your role in the world before you got involved that way?
I saw myself as somebody who put in an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. I was a voter. I could be depended upon to work hard and get ahead, but I didn't see myself as being responsible for other people outside my family.
There are a large number of people today that says if they work hard, make a living, pay their taxes, and vote,
right.
that's enough, that they're a good citizen.
Right, that's right. I think that we've seen that in our country right now, it isn't enough, that most people are very dissatisfied with the state of our civic life and with our ability to talk to each other, to listen, and to solve problems together. So staying in our isolated families and thinking only about the immediate needs of what will benefit us is not, I think, what the Founding Fathers were thinking of when they founded this country and when we struggled together over defining a constitution that had a Bill of Rights in it that defined citizen rights and responsibilities, that we were all in this together and we needed to be able to work together in order to make that more perfect union that the preamble talks about. Our history has been a struggle to live up to those principles and those values. And that's what civics is about. It's that public space that Paul is talking about, how we struggle together in the public square so that we can realize those principles. And the concern of the council is that young people are not getting the skills that they need in order to play that role as citizens.
It sounds like hard work.
Well, I think it is hard work.
It is.
To go back to your point, I think one of the reasons it's important to study history, I think, one of the reasons history is an important component to good civics understanding is because history teaches us, if we're attentive to it, I believe, I think most historians would agree, that the struggle in the United States to be a more perfect union, the struggle to live up to the ideals written into the Declaration of Independence and into the Constitution, that struggle is a participatory endeavor of citizens. And if everybody's sitting back sort of saying that's not my responsibility, we would not have made the developments, we would not have seen the developments that have occurred in our history. And I think that challenge is still there for us. So it is work. But I think it's a question of whether we're serious about about living in a democracy, if we're serious about democracy.
I asked Jean when she first became aware of herself as a citizen, a participant in our society, when was your first recognition of the concept of citizenship with regard to yourself?
I don't know that I ever had a kind of an epiphany. I think it was something that I just sort of learned as a young child, and I mean I can sort of pick out particular events. One was, my father was very active in opposing the war in Vietnam, and I, as a very young child, sort of saw that and was a part of that in various ways. I remember going to a demonstration as an 11-year-old and sort of beginning to see his involvement in civic action, and I think that had that seemed like what citizens do. And I like Jean, I had volunteer experiences. The first profound ones probably were in college, doing some teaching, and I think I found, like she did, that they were began to see that this is how, I can be involved in something that feels meaningful. I can see that this is how I was working with other people. So it was a very collective kind of a thing, and together we were making a difference in a particular community with a summer school program.
I had never really thought of it until we started to talk about this program. I think in my case, the first time I turned on a TV set and I saw John Wayne going off to fight the bad guys, or see the old movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or something, but the most impressive moment I recall, I was a junior in high school and we took our junior trip to Washington, D.C., and I stood in the Capitol Rotunda and realized what had gone on there, and it was just an amazing feeling. A few years ago, Hillary Clinton took a lot of criticism for saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Folks, the village is going to raise your child whether you want them to or not. Civics education is going to come from that village unless you direct otherwise. Help your kids. Make sure you know what's going on in your schools. Watch what they're seeing on television and listening to on the radio and what's happening in your community. And get out there and try to control it. Paul, Jean, thank you very much, folks, for being here with us. Thank you also for being with us. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening.
On the LawWorks website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the LawWorks programs on YouTube and iTunes. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us email at thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook.
The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The LawWorks is made possible by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and legal system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. By the generous support of Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, providing high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems. And by viewers like you.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.